Right, so today we're going to look at the imperfect tense in French. This is another past tense, and this is the thing that makes it difficult. You should have already looked at the perfect tense for describing completed events in the past. The imperfect tense is also used to describe events in the past, but there is a difference. And it is this difference that makes the imperfect tense difficult for English speakers. Forming it isn't too difficult. Making the imperfect tense isn't hard. It's recognizing when to use it that's the complicated bit. So let's have a look at a few examples and see why. I liked chocolate when I was little. To start off with, that looks as though it's going to be in the perfect tense because we've got the ed on I liked, and it's in the past. But the difference is, I liked chocolate didn't just happen once. It is not an event that was short, completed, and over. It went on for a period of time. And it is the period of time that is the key concept with the imperfect tense. The same with when I was little. I was little didn't just happen once and was over quickly. It went on for a period of time. So this I was will be in the imperfect tense. Completely different verb form here. The sun was shining. Again, it is talking about something that happened in the past and went over for a period of time. It had a length to it in the past. And this is a bit easier to recognize because we've got a was and an in, and they are both key indicators that we are in the imperfect tense. We call it the imperfect tense historically because with the difference from the perfect tense is that things in the imperfect tense don't have to be completed. And the sun was shining doesn't tell you anything about whether the sun is still shining. It may still be shining, and you could still say the sun was shining. So in the imperfect tense, the past tense event can be incomplete. They used to go to Cornwall on holiday. Again, is a different type of verb in English. They used to go. And whenever you see used to, you should start to think that you're in the imperfect tense. Because as well as describing something that extends over a period of time, the imperfect tense can be used to explain something that happened regularly in the past. And that's the case with this example. It's also the case with the fourth example. He would go to town every Saturday. This is something that happened over and over again in the past, regularly. And the difficulty with this is the word would in English, because most often when you use would in English, you will actually need a conditional in French. So that's something to look out for. But if it's something that happened regularly in the past, it will be the imperfect tense if you use would. Okay. So let's have a little bit of a look at these sentences using a bit of a diagram, because this is still a little bit confusing. So if we have our time going from left in the past to right in the future, and if we say that now is this point here, we take our first example, I liked chocolate when I was little, we can put those on the diagram by saying that me being little and me liking chocolate happened over this period of time. And it is because of this period of time that both these verbs will be in the imperfect tense in French, because they didn't just happen once. We can see this more clearly if we extend our second example to the sun was shining, so I went for a walk. The sun shining happened at some period in the past, possibly quite close to now. And then the key is that the going for a walk was one event that happened in the past, and it happened within that time period of the sun shining. And the deeper red shows you that this is in a different tense. I went for a walk in this example would be in the perfect tense, because it is one completed action in the past. And the sun was shining would be in the imperfect tense, because it is over a period of time. And that's the difference between the two tenses. Imperfect tense, the sun was shining. I went for a walk, one completed action. perfect tense. And if you can picture that diagram, that will help you to remember which is which. Okay, looking at our third example, they used to go to Cornwall on holiday. This is different because it's not something that continues, but something that's regular. So you've got several of these in the past. And it's the regularity of these Cornwall holidays that makes this sentence, they used to go, in the imperfect tense. And that would be the same as with the example with would. You would go to town on Saturday afternoon would be the same thing. You'd have lots of these red arrows, completed events, but the fact that they're regular makes it imperfect tense. So there are three examples, and we can see then that the English doesn't give us much clue because all of these are imperfect tense, but they look very different in English, and that's the reason we have to picture this time frame, this diagram. But as a general rule of thumb, if you've got some form of was or were with an ing verb, you're usually going to be in the imperfect tense. And if you've got some form of used to, you're generally going to be in the imperfect tense. So at the end of the day, if you look out for was or were ing and used to, they are your best bet to get the right answer most of the time. Right, let's have a look at making one of these imperfect tenses. The first stage is to take the new form of the present tense. We don't take the stem from the infinitive this time, because that way we will have fewer irregular verbs, and we'll see that in a moment. We take off the ONS from the new form of the present tense, and we add the ending. And the nice thing is that the endings for the imperfect tense are the same for ER, IR, and RE verbs. In fact, all verbs are the same endings for the imperfect tense. You've only got one set of endings to learn. Let's look at that in practice. If we start with our infinitive from the dictionary, jouer means to play. And first stage is to form the new form of the present tense. So if you're not sure how to do that, you need to look over the lesson on the present tense. But we remove the ER from the infinitive and we put on the ONS. And of course we add nous. Nous jouons means we play. And that is our starting point. That is stage 1 for the imperfect tense. Stage 2 is to remove the ONS. And that's why it looks a bit silly. And of course we're going to take away the we. It looks a bit silly to do that extended stage. Why, you ask, don't we just take off the ER from the infinitive? Why do we put an ONS on to just take it off again? It seems a bit daft when we have regular ER verbs, but it helps us with our irregular verbs and our IR verbs particularly. So it's worth doing for all of them, because then you only have to learn one way of making the imperfect tense. And once we've got our stem for all our different persons, I, you, he, she, we, you, they, we add the correct endings, and they are in bold there: AIS, AIS, AIT, IONS, IEZ, AIENT. And they are really worth learning, because as I say, they cover all verbs in the imperfect tense. They are on the back of the higher tier learning mat as well. And that's how they will be translated most of the time. And you can see there we could have a was with an ing or a used to, because we could be describing something that happened over a period of time. I was playing in the garden when my mum called me in, or I used to play the piano, but then I gave up. Both of those would be the imperfect tense because they're both concentrating on time periods in the past, even though one is continuous and one is a regular thing that happened in the past. So, je jouais, tu jouais, il or elle jouait. You'll notice that all three of those are pronounced the same. The first three are all pronounced the same. And then we've got nous jouions, vous jouiez, and il or elle jouait. And again, you will notice that il or elle jouait, jouer is pronounced the same as jouer and jouer and jouer. So they AIS, AIS, AIT, and AINT are all pronounced E. Okay, so that makes it easy to say as well, because it's only the nu and the vu form that have different endings as you hear it. So let's have a look now and realize why it is we don't just take the infinitive and take the ER off. If we have a look at the verb boire, to drink, which is irregular in the present tense, if we were just going to take off the ending of the infinitive, we would remove the RE and we would be left with bois as our stem, and we would add the endings onto that if we were going to go the easy way. However, that doesn't work with boire. So if we were going to do it that way, we'd have to say boire was an irregular verb. However, if we start with the nu form of the present tense, which is nous buvons, because it's an irregular verb and it's on the back of the learning mat, if we use the present tense nu form, it's not an irregular verb in the imperfect tense, because bouvre is the stem we want for the imperfect tense. So if we take we drink and take the ONS off, we will get the right answer, because je buvais is I was drinking or I used to drink. So we've put the AIS ending on the stem that we've taken from the nu form of the present tense. So it's those verbs and the IR verbs that mean it's worth doing like that. Okay. So, because we've gone about forming the imperfect tense in that sort of roundabout way by taking the nu form of the present tense, the good thing is we only have one irregular verb in the imperfect tense. All the others can be formed from the nu form of their present tense. And predictably that verb is être, to be. The stem does not come from the present tense of être, which is nous sommes. Doesn't work. Our stem for être is et, with an E acute. So we have j'étais, tu étais, il était, elle était, nous étions, vous étiez, ils étaient, elles étaient. And they translate as I was, you were, he or she was, we were, you were, they were. And that is the only irregular verb. Okay? So, let's just have a look at those on the learning mat very quickly. Okay, so the imperfect tense is the fourth column along on the back of the higher tier learning mat. And again, this time it doesn't really matter whether you look at the ER, the IR, or the RE verbs, because the endings are the same. But it does show you, and it does point out in bold, the ISS with the IR verbs. And that comes from the nous finissons in the present tense. And therefore, if we remove the ONS, we get finis, and then we can add our AIS to get je finissais, I was finishing, or I used to finish. And remember, our we form irregular verbs are down here to the bottom right. So if we wanted I was writing, we'll find to write. Nous écrivons is we write, take the ONS off, we'd get écrive, and then we'd add our endings to écrive. So j'écrivais would mean I was writing or I used to write.